Captain Jenkins ordered Jasmine Williams off the plane for passenger comfort issues. As security approached, Dr. Michael Williams, aerospace engineer with 3 NASA medals, stormed down the aisle. "That's my daughter you're removing because she's black. Let's see what NASA thinks about this." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe now to support more stories about standing up against injustice. Can you imagine how you'd react if you saw this happening on your flight? Let's find out what happened next. Jasmine Williams couldn't contain her excitement as she packed her suitcase, carefully tucking her research papers between layers of clothing. At 16, she had accomplished something extraordinary, securing a spot in the National Youth Science Competition in Houston, Texas. Her research on atmospheric conditions and their effects on flight patterns had impressed the judges enough to earn her one of only 20 slots nationwide. "You sure you'll be okay flying alone?" Dr. Michael Williams asked, leaning against her bedroom doorframe. His NASA jacket hung nearby, a symbol of his prestigious career as an aerospace engineer. "Dad, I'll be fine," Jasmine assured him, tucking a stray braid behind her ear. "You've got that important presentation. I can handle a plane ride." Dr. Williams nodded, though his expression remained worried. As a black man who had risen to prominence in a predominantly white field, he knew all too well the challenges his daughter might face traveling alone. He'd planned to join her later, after delivering a crucial presentation on the newest spacecraft materials his team had developed. "I've prepared you as best I can," he said softly. "Just remember. Hold my head high, know my rights, and document everything," Jasmine finished for him. It was a mantra she'd grown up hearing, one of many survival tactics for navigating a world that often judged her by her skin color before anything else. The morning of her flight, Jasmine reviewed her presentation one final time. Her research could potentially improve flight safety during adverse weather conditions, ironically relevant to the very Atlantic Airlines flight she would be boarding. Her father had splurged on a first-class ticket, wanting to ensure her comfort for her first solo trip. "Text me when you board and when you land," Dr. Williams instructed as he dropped her at the departures terminal. "And Jasmine? I'm proud of you. So proud." Jasmine squared her shoulders as she entered the airport, pulling her carry-on behind her. She dressed professionally in a button-up blouse and slacks, hair neatly braided, another unspoken rule her father had taught her. Never give them a reason, he'd say, though they both knew reasons would be manufactured regardless. The check-in process went smoothly enough, though Jasmine noticed the agent's slight double-take when checking her first-class ticket. At security, she was randomly selected for additional screening, a process she'd witnessed her father endure countless times. By the time she reached the gate, boarding had begun. The gate agent smiled at her as she scanned Jasmine's boarding pass, but the smile faltered slightly. "First class. Are you sure you're at the right gate, sweetie?" "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied politely, maintaining eye contact the way her father had taught her. "Seat 3A. The woman nodded, though her eyes reflected doubt. "Enjoy your flight." Jasmine boarded with the first group, settling into her spacious window seat and placing her backpack underneath. She pulled out her notebook, reviewing her presentation notes one more time. "Excuse me." A flight attendant with a nameplate reading Brenda Taylor loomed over her. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Jasmine produced it without comment. This was the third time she'd been asked to verify her ticket since entering the airport. "Thank you," Brenda said curtly, handing it back before moving on without the smile she'd offered to other first-class passengers. The cabin filled gradually. A middle-aged white woman in an expensive-looking suit took the aisle seat in Jasmine's row, giving her a quick once-over before turning away with a slight frown. "Can I get you a pre-flight beverage?" Brenda asked the woman warmly. "Sparkling water, please," the woman replied. "No ice." When Brenda didn't extend the same offer to Jasmine, she spoke up. "May I have an apple juice, please?" The flight attendant's smile tightened. Once we're in the air. Jasmine returned to her notes, trying to ignore the slight. She'd faced worse, and today was too important to let small indignities derail her focus. The woman beside her, whose designer bag displayed a luggage tag reading, Karen Porter, seemed increasingly agitated. She repeatedly pressed her call button, complaining about the temperature, requesting an extra pillow, and finally leaning across to speak directly to Brenda. "Is there perhaps another seat available?" Karen asked in a stage whisper that Jasmine could clearly hear. "I'm not comfortable." Brenda cast a meaningful glance toward Jasmine. "Let me check with the captain." Jasmine gripped her armrests, her heart beginning to race. She knew what was happening, had seen it before with her father, but couldn't quite believe it was occurring now, on today of all days. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay. Please remain seated while we resolve a minor issue." Through the window, Jasmine could see a security vehicle approaching the plane. Her stomach dropped. The cabin fell silent as Captain Thomas Jenkins emerged from the cockpit. Tall with salt and pepper hair and the confident stride of a man accustomed to authority, he scanned the first-class cabin before his gaze settled on Jasmine. Behind him, a security officer with "Fisher" embroidered on his uniform waited with hands clasped behind his back. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Jenkins announced, his voice carrying throughout the cabin, "we need to resolve a seating issue before departure. We appreciate your patience." Every eye in the cabin turned toward Jasmine as the captain approached her seat. She felt her cheeks burning under the collective gaze of strangers. "Miss," Captain Jenkins addressed her, voice clipped and professional yet somehow condescending, "there seems to be an issue with passenger comfort in this section. I need you to gather your belongings and deplane for further verification." Jasmine's mouth went dry. "Sir, I don't understand. My ticket is for this seat. I've shown it 3 times already." The captain's expression hardened. "This isn't a discussion, young lady. We've received complaints, and airline policy gives us discretion to address passenger comfort issues." From the corner of her eye, Jasmine caught Karen Porter's satisfied smirk. The woman shifted in her seat, suddenly very interested in her magazine. "What complaints?" Jasmine asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I've been sitting here quietly reviewing my notes. Officer Fisher will escort you to the terminal where we can sort this out," Captain Jenkins continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The rest of the passengers shouldn't be delayed because of this situation." Jasmine felt a surge of panic. Missing this flight meant missing the competition orientation. Her entire future could be derailed because someone felt uncomfortable sitting next to a black teenager. "I paid for this seat," she insisted, more firmly this time. "I have a right to know specifically what policy I've violated." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. A few pulled out phones, beginning to record the interaction. Captain Jenkins noticed and his jaw tightened. "Either you can come willingly, or we'll have to remove you," he said, voice lowered but intensity increased. "Your choice." Security Officer Fisher stepped forward, hand moving toward Jasmine's arm. "Come on, miss. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jasmine flinched away from his touch, remembering her father's warnings. "Don't touch me, please. I'll get my things." With trembling hands, she gathered her notebook and backpack, aware of dozens of eyes watching her every move. Some passengers looked embarrassed, others curious, most simply looked away, complicit in their silence. As she stood, Fisher gripped her elbow, unnecessarily tight. "This way." "I know how to walk," Jasmine said, pulling her arm free. The indignity of being physically handled sparked a flare of anger that momentarily overshadowed her humiliation. Walking down the aisle felt like a public execution of her dignity. Each step under the scrutiny of strangers who had witnessed her being singled out and removed felt endless. Some passengers whispered to each other. One woman looked genuinely concerned but said nothing. At the aircraft door, Jasmine paused. "May I make a call before we continue? My father needs to know I'm being removed from the flight." Captain Jenkins nodded curtly, clearly wanting her off his plane as quickly as possible. With fingers still trembling, Jasmine dialed her father's number. He answered on the first ring. "Dad," she said, voice finally breaking. "They're making me get off the plane." "What? Why?" Dr. Williams's voice sharpened instantly. "The captain says there are passenger comfort issues. There's a woman who didn't want to sit next to me. They have security here." Jasmine turned away from Fisher's impassive stare, lowering her voice. "It's happening just like you said it could." Her father's silence spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice was deadly calm. "Put the captain on the phone. He wants to talk to you," Jasmine said, extending the phone toward Captain Jenkins. The captain shook his head. "We'll sort this out in the terminal. Keep moving, please." Fisher's hand returned to her elbow, firmer this time. "You'll need to come with me now." As they marched her through the jet bridge, Jasmine remembered all the conversations with her father about traveling while black. The extra precautions. The additional preparations. The mental fortitude required to face prejudice with dignity. "This isn't right," she said, partly to herself and partly to Fisher. "I didn't do anything wrong. Just following protocol, miss," Fisher replied mechanically. "The captain has final authority on his aircraft." When they reached the terminal, Jasmine saw her father's caller ID flashing on her phone screen again. Fisher gestured for her to step aside near a row of empty seats, maintaining a watchful position as she answered. "They took me off, Dad," she said, no longer able to hold back tears. "In front of everyone." Dr. Michael Williams's voice was steel. "I'm coming. Don't sign anything. Don't admit to anything. Record everything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jasmine knew what this meant. Her father was abandoning his crucial presentation to NASA executives, potentially jeopardizing his career advancement, to come to her aid. The knowledge only deepened her humiliation and kindled a growing rage. As she waited under Fisher's watchful eye, she opened her phone's camera and began recording, narrating the events that had led to this moment. If nothing else, she would have documentation of what had happened to her today. Her father had taught her that truth was sometimes the only weapon available, and she intended to wield it. Dr. Michael Williams ended the call with his daughter and immediately stood up, abandoning his presentation materials at the podium. The NASA executives and engineers in the conference room looked up in surprise. "Michael?" Director Thompson questioned. "We're about to begin." "Family emergency," Dr. Williams replied tersely, already shrugging into his NASA jacket, the one emblazoned with mission patches and his name stitched in gold thread. "My daughter is being removed from her flight because a passenger doesn't want to sit next to a black teenager." The room fell silent. Director Thompson's face registered shock, then understanding. "Go. We'll reschedule." Dr. Williams nodded gratefully before rushing out. In the hallway, he pulled up the Atlantic Airlines customer service number, calling as he sprinted to his car. "This is Dr. Michael Williams," he stated after navigating the automated system. "My daughter Jasmine Williams is being illegally removed from Flight AA-237 to Houston right now on discriminatory grounds. I'm on my way to the airport, and I expect this situation to be resolved before I arrive." The customer service representative began reciting policy about captain's authority, but Dr. Williams cut her off. "I'm a senior aerospace engineer with NASA. I understand aviation regulations better than your script writers. What's happening is illegal discrimination, and I'm recording this call. Connect me to a supervisor immediately." As he sped toward the airport, memories flooded back, the countless times he'd been questioned despite his credentials, asked to verify his presence in first-class lounges, pulled aside for random security checks. He'd hoped Jasmine wouldn't face the same treatment, at least not so young, but he prepared her nonetheless. The supervisor was equally unhelpful, insisting they needed to gather all the facts. Dr. Williams ended the call and dialed his attorney. "James, it's Michael. Atlantic Airlines is removing my daughter from her flight because she's black. I need you to be ready if this escalates." After explaining the situation, he added, "And contact Davis at the NAACP. This isn't going to be swept under the rug." Arriving at the airport in record time, Dr. Williams parked haphazardly and ran to the terminal, NASA jacket clearly visible. His phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine, Terminal C, Gate 22. "They won't let me back on." At the security checkpoint, Dr. Williams flashed his NASA credentials. "Federal emergency, I need immediate access." The TSA agent hesitated. "Sir, NASA credentials don't automatically grant. My daughter is being discriminated against by Atlantic Airlines. Every minute delayed is additional liability for this airport if you're impeding a federal employee responding to civil rights violations." Whether intimidated by his authoritative tone or the implied legal threat, the agent waved him through the expedited line. Dr. Williams sprinted through the terminal, his NASA jacket drawing stares. When he reached Gate 22, he saw Jasmine sitting alone, Security Officer Fisher standing nearby. Her eyes were red-rimmed but her back was straight, maintaining her dignity even in humiliation. "Dad," she called, relief flooding her face. Dr. Williams embraced her briefly before turning to Fisher. "Where's Captain Jenkins?" "Sir, the aircraft is preparing for departure. If you have concerns, you can speak to the gate agent about rebooking." "The hell I will," Dr. Williams interrupted, already striding toward the jet bridge. "That plane isn't leaving until this is addressed." Fisher moved to block him. "Sir, you can't board without a ticket." Dr. Williams pulled out his phone. "I'm recording this. You're preventing a federal employee from investigating a civil rights violation involving a minor. Move aside." Fisher hesitated, glancing toward the gate agent for guidance. The young woman looked panicked, already on the phone presumably calling for backup. "Dad, don't get in trouble because of me," Jasmine pleaded. "This isn't trouble, Jasmine. This is standing up for what's right." Dr. Williams fixed Fisher with a steely gaze. "Your choice. Move willingly or explain to your supervisors why you physically blocked a NASA engineer from protecting his daughter's civil rights." After a tense moment, Fisher stepped aside. "I'll need to accompany you." "Fine." Dr. Williams motioned for Jasmine to follow as he strode down the jet bridge. When they reached the aircraft door, a flight attendant attempted to block their entry. "Sir, boarding is complete." "You can't, I'm Dr. Michael Williams, NASA aerospace engineer," he interrupted, voice carrying into the cabin. "Your captain removed my 16-year-old daughter from this flight for being black. I'm coming aboard to address this discrimination, and this conversation will be recorded and shared with NASA Public Affairs, the FAA, and civil rights attorneys." The flight attendant blanched, stepping back involuntarily. Dr. Williams entered the aircraft, Jasmine close behind. The cabin fell silent as passengers recognized the man in the NASA jacket. Captain Jenkins emerged from the cockpit, face flushing when he saw Dr. Williams. "This aircraft is under my command," Jenkins began. "You're not authorized. I'm authorized by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act," Dr. Williams cut in, voice controlled but vibrating with intensity. "You removed my daughter without cause except for the discomfort of a prejudiced passenger." He pointed directly at Karen Porter, who shrank in her seat. "That woman complained about sitting next to my daughter, and instead of addressing the racism, you punished the victim." Captain Jenkins lowered his voice. "Dr. Williams, if we could discuss this privately." "There's nothing private about publicly humiliating my daughter," Dr. Williams replied, maintaining his volume. "Every passenger watched you escort her out like a criminal. They'll all witness the resolution too." He held up his phone, still recording. Atlantic Airlines has a documented history of discriminatory treatment toward passengers of color. Today, you targeted the daughter of a NASA engineer heading to represent our country in a national science competition. Several passengers gasped. Others began recording the confrontation on their own phones. I want an explanation, right now, about what passenger comfort issue required removing my daughter from her rightfully purchased seat, Dr. Williams demanded. Captain Jenkins's eyes darted around the cabin, noting the many phones recording the interaction. There appears to have been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Dr. Williams interrupted. Either you had a valid reason to remove my daughter, or you discriminated against her. Which is it? The captain's silence was damning. I thought so, Dr. Williams continued. Now, my daughter will return to her assigned seat, which she purchased legally, and this flight will proceed. Afterward, we'll discuss Atlantic Airlines' pattern of discrimination with your corporate headquarters, the Department of Transportation, and if necessary, federal court. He gestured for Jasmine to return to her seat. Karen Porter suddenly became very interested in gathering her belongings. I believe I'd prefer a different seat after all, she muttered, avoiding eye contact with anyone. As Jasmine reclaimed her rightful place, other passengers began to whisper. Some looked ashamed for their silence earlier. Others seemed angry on Jasmine's behalf. Most importantly, multiple phones were still recording, capturing every moment of the confrontation for a much wider audience than just those on the plane. Within minutes of Dr. Williams confronting Captain Jenkins, the first video clips appeared on social media. A passenger near the front of the plane had captured the entire exchange in high definition, complete with Captain Jenkins's inability to justify removing Jasmine and Karen Porter's embarrassed attempt to change seats. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack began trending almost immediately, followed closely by hashtag NASADAD and hashtag Atlantic Airlines Racism. As the plane remained at the gate, Captain Jenkins unwilling to force Dr. Williams off but also reluctant to take off with him aboard, the videos spread like wildfire. Atlantic Airlines removed a black teen from a flight, then her NASA engineer father showed up to confront the racism, read one viral tweet, accompanied by a clip that had already garnered 50,000 views. In Atlantic Airlines corporate headquarters, alerts began pinging on multiple computers. The social media monitoring team watched in horror as mentions of the airline skyrocketed, overwhelmingly negative. The stock trading desk noted the first downward tick in share price as early market reactions registered the brewing PR disaster. Get me everything on this situation now, demanded CEO Jackson Palmer, watching the real-time sentiment analysis plummeting on his dashboard. Who authorized removing a teenager because of her race? Back on the aircraft, Dr. Williams stood firmly in the aisle, still recording as he addressed the other passengers. I apologize for the delay to your journey, he said clearly. But I cannot and will not allow my daughter to be discriminated against. Too often, these incidents happen in silence, with no accountability. Today will be different. Several passengers applauded. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Karen Porter had succeeded in changing to a seat in the back of the plane, attempting to distance herself from the situation she had created. Outside the aircraft, news vans began arriving at the airport. Atlantic Airlines' PR disaster was escalating by the minute as journalists picked up the trending story. The airline's history of similar incidents, previously settled quietly or ignored entirely, was being unearthed by internet sleuths and shared alongside the new footage. In NASA's headquarters, Dr. Williams's colleagues gathered around computers, watching the situation unfold. The NASA Public Affairs Office, recognizing one of their decorated engineers at the center of a discrimination case, began drafting a statement of support. Dr. Williams has consistently demonstrated the highest levels of professionalism and integrity in his 15 years with our agency, read the draft. NASA stands firmly against discrimination in all forms and supports our employees and their families in confronting injustice. Back in the terminal, airport officials huddled in an emergency meeting. The Atlantic Airlines ground staff argued for removing Dr. Williams by force if necessary, while airport security expressed reluctance to physically engage with a federal employee clearly standing up for his daughter's civil rights. Especially one being live-streamed to hundreds of thousands of viewers. "We can't drag a NASA engineer off in his official jacket," the head of airport security insisted. "The optics would be catastrophic for everyone involved." On the plane, flight attendant Brenda Taylor approached Dr. Williams cautiously. "Sir, perhaps we could resolve this if you'd allow the flight to continue? Your daughter can certainly keep her seat." "That's not resolution," Dr. Williams replied firmly. "That's sweeping racism under the rug. I want Captain Jenkins and the staff involved in this decision to acknowledge what happened and apologize to my daughter publicly." Meanwhile, Jasmine had discovered that her science competition peers were rallying around her online. The competition organizers had issued a statement confirming they would accommodate her regardless of when she arrived, refusing to allow discrimination to impact her participation. Other black passengers on the flight began approaching Dr. Williams during the standoff, quietly sharing their own experiences of discrimination on Atlantic Airlines flights. "They made my 7-year-old son sit alone last month because a passenger complained," one mother whispered. "I didn't have the courage to fight back like you're doing. They've randomly searched my bags every single time," added a black businessman in a suit. "Never seen them do it to my white colleagues." As these conversations occurred, more passengers began recording, documenting not just the initial incident but the pattern of behavior being revealed in real time. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and felt powerless to stop it? Comment number 1 if you believe airlines should have zero tolerance for racist passengers. Comment number 2 if you think Captain Jenkins should be fired for his actions. Hit that like button if you stand with Dr. Williams and Jasmine against discrimination, and subscribe to see how this shocking confrontation continues to unfold. What do you think Atlantic Airlines will do now that their discrimination has been exposed to the world? Let's find out. Atlantic Airlines CEO Jackson Palmer paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear as he received updates on the situation. The company's stock had dropped 4% in the 2 hours since the first videos went viral, a loss of hundreds of millions in market value. How the hell did this happen? He demanded of his executive team on the conference call. "We have explicit policies against this exact scenario." The captain claims he was following protocol for passenger complaints, explained Chief Operations Officer Lisa Martinez. But the footage clearly shows racial bias was the motivating factor. "Our crisis management team is on site," added VP of Public Relations David Chin. But Dr. Williams is refusing private negotiations. He insists any resolution be as public as the discrimination his daughter faced. Palmer rubbed his temples. "What are our legal options here?" The general counsel cleared his throat. "Frankly, sir, they're limited. Dr. Williams has documentation of the event, multiple witnesses, a spotless personal reputation, and NASA backing him. Fighting this would only compound the damage. So we cave to every demand?" Palmer asked incredulously. "Not every demand," the lawyer clarified. "But acknowledging fault and offering significant restitution quickly would be advisable. Our preliminary investigation confirms there was no legitimate reason to remove Ms. Williams from the flight." Palmer stared out at the Manhattan skyline, weighing his options. Atlantic Airlines had weathered PR storms before, but this one was different, a perfect storm of sympathetic victim, powerful parent, clear evidence, and explosive social media exposure. "Send in our best people," he finally decided. "Offer whatever reasonable compensation it takes. But no admissions that could expose us to class action liability." Back at the airport, Atlantic Airlines' crisis team arrived in force, 3 executives in perfectly tailored suits accompanied by 2 attorneys. They approached the aircraft with the demeanor of diplomats entering hostile territory. By this point, the standoff had lasted nearly 3 hours. Some passengers had requested to deplane, choosing to rebook rather than remain in the increasingly tense environment. Others stayed, invested in witnessing the resolution or simply unable to miss their connections in Houston. The crisis team requested a private meeting with Dr. Williams, who refused. "My daughter was humiliated publicly," he stated firmly. "Any resolution will be equally public." Inside the cabin, the dynamics had shifted dramatically. Captain Jenkins remained in the cockpit, emerging only when absolutely necessary. Flight attendant Brenda Taylor had attempted to distance herself from the incident, claiming she was just following protocol and had no idea racism was involved, statements directly contradicted by passenger videos showing her earlier interactions with Jasmine. Karen Porter, the passenger whose complaint had triggered the incident, tried to exit the aircraft during a moment when attention was focused elsewhere, but another passenger recognized her from the videos already circulating. "That's her, the woman who complained about sitting next to the black girl," the passenger called out, causing all eyes and several camera phones to turn toward Karen. Karen froze, caught in the act of trying to escape accountability. "I never said anything about race," she insisted, voice shrill with defensiveness. "I simply requested a seat change because I was uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable with what exactly?" asked an elderly black woman seated nearby. The child was quietly studying. "What made you uncomfortable enough to have her removed from the plane?" Karen had no answer that wouldn't incriminate her further. The Atlantic Airlines crisis team, recognizing the situation continued to deteriorate, made their first official offer to Dr. Williams: full refunds for both his and Jasmine's tickets, first-class upgrades for their return flights, and $10,000 in flight vouchers. Dr. Williams didn't even consider it. "This isn't about money or perks," he explained, still recording. "This is about accountability and systemic change. My demands are simple: a public apology to my daughter, immediate termination of the staff who discriminated against her, and implementation of new anti-bias policies and training across your airline." The crisis team exchanged glances, aware that their scripted responses were inadequate for this situation. "We'll need to consult with our leadership," one executive hedged. "Take your time," Dr. Williams replied calmly. "We're not going anywhere, and neither is this plane." In the corporate headquarters, Palmer received this update with growing alarm. The longer the standoff continued, the more damage to Atlantic Airlines' reputation and bottom line. Moreover, a whistleblower within the company had just leaked internal emails to a prominent news outlet, revealing that customer complaints based on racial discomfort had been quietly accommodated dozens of times in the past year alone. Palmer made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed the direct line to the crisis team leader at the airport. "Put me on speaker with Dr. Williams," he instructed. "I'll handle this personally." When the connection was established, Palmer introduced himself. "Dr. Williams, this is Jackson Palmer, CEO of Atlantic Airlines. First, let me express my sincere regret for what happened to your daughter today." "Regret isn't accountability," Dr. Williams responded evenly. "What specific actions will you take to address this incident and prevent future occurrences?" Palmer had prepared for tough negotiations, but not for the unwavering moral clarity he encountered from Dr. Williams. Every corporate platitude and carefully worded non-apology was met with the same steady insistence on concrete action and public accountability. As they spoke, the NASA Public Affairs Office released their official statement supporting Dr. Williams, applying additional pressure. Reporters outside the airport continued live coverage of the situation, interviewing deplaned passengers who provided even more damning accounts of the incident. Captain Jenkins, growing increasingly desperate as his role in the discrimination became the focus of national attention, emerged from the cockpit with a new strategy. "Dr. Williams," he said, attempting to project authority, "while I respect your concerns, I must insist that you deplane immediately so we can continue our flight operations. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to have security remove you." The cabin collectively held its breath, sensing a dangerous escalation. Dr. Williams turned to face Jenkins directly. "Are you threatening to forcibly remove a NASA aerospace engineer who is protecting his minor daughter from documented discrimination? With dozens of cameras recording and a national audience watching?" Please clarify your statement for the record. The security officers who had entered the aircraft at Jenkins' request exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unwilling to physically engage with Dr. Williams under these circumstances. At that moment, something remarkable happened. Jasmine, who had remained silent throughout much of the confrontation, stood up. "I'd like to address everyone," she said, voice initially soft but gaining strength. The cabin fell silent. "My name is Jasmine Williams. I'm 16 years old, and I was supposed to be flying to Houston to represent our state in the National Youth Science Competition. Instead, I'm experiencing what my father has tried to prepare me for my entire life. Being treated as less than human because of my skin color." Her voice didn't waver as she continued. "This isn't an isolated incident. It's not about one airline or one captain or one complaint. It's about a system that views black people as inherently problematic, as automatically less deserving of dignity and respect." Passengers listened in rapt attention, many recording her impromptu speech. "All my life, I've been told to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. Today, despite doing everything right, dressing professionally, speaking politely, having every document in order, I was still deemed unworthy of keeping my rightfully purchased seat." She looked directly at Captain Jenkins. "When you chose to remove me instead of addressing the prejudice, you told me and everyone watching that racism is acceptable on your aircraft. That's not a misunderstanding or a protocol issue. That's a moral failure." The cabin erupted in applause as Jasmine finished speaking. Her words, captured on dozens of phones, would be shared millions of times in the coming hours, becoming a defining moment in the rapidly evolving situation. Back in the corporate headquarters, Palmer watched the footage of Jasmine's speech stream in real time, recognizing that the teenager had just changed the entire dynamic of the negotiation. No amount of corporate maneuvering could counter the moral clarity of her message. He turned to his executive team. "Prepare a comprehensive response package. Public apology, termination of involved staff, full policy review, and substantial compensation. This ends today, on their terms." Atlantic Airlines CEO Jackson Palmer's voice crackled over the speakerphone in the crowded aircraft cabin. The entire plane had fallen silent, hanging on every word of the direct negotiation between the corporate executive and Dr. Williams. Palmer had finally abandoned the script his legal team had prepared, instead speaking with unexpected candor. "Dr. Williams," Palmer said, audible to everyone present, "our board has convened an emergency session. They've authorized me to meet your demands. Atlantic Airlines will issue a public apology to your daughter. Captain Jenkins and flight attendant Brenda Taylor will be suspended immediately pending investigation, likely leading to termination. Most importantly, we commit to implementing comprehensive anti-bias training and policy changes across our entire organization." A murmur ran through the cabin. This level of corporate capitulation was unprecedented, a direct result of the overwhelming public pressure that had built over the past 4 hours. "I appreciate those steps," Dr. Williams replied, maintaining his composure. "But I need specifics on the policy changes and verification mechanisms." Too often, promises of institutional change evaporate once public attention moves on. As this high-stakes negotiation continued, Karen Porter attempted once again to slip away unnoticed. She had changed seats multiple times during the standoff, trying to distance herself from her role in initiating the incident. But her attempts at anonymity had failed, passengers had identified her from the videos and were openly pointing her out to newcomers. A businessman in his 50s approached her seat. "You know, my daughter is about the same age as Jasmine," he said, voice tight with controlled anger. "I've been sitting here wondering what kind of person sees a black teenager sitting quietly in first class and feels so threatened they need her removed." Karen clutched her designer bag closer. "You don't understand. It wasn't about, save it," the man interrupted. "We all watched it happen. You saw a young black woman in a space you thought she didn't belong, and you used your privilege to try to remove her. What you didn't count on was her father having more privilege than you." Karen's face flushed crimson. "I'm being harassed now," she announced loudly, looking around for support that didn't materialize. "This is unacceptable." "No," replied an elderly woman across the aisle. "What's unacceptable is causing a child to be humiliated because of your racism. Count yourself lucky that embarrassment is all you're facing." The confrontation drew Captain Jenkins from the cockpit once more. Having realized his career was essentially over, he made one final desperate attempt to reassert control. "This has gone on long enough," he declared, approaching Dr. Williams. "Either you deplane now, or I'll have security remove you forcibly. This aircraft is still under my command." The two security officers who had remained on board exchanged alarmed glances. One stepped forward. "Captain, with respect, we've been monitoring the situation. We will not be removing Dr. Williams or his daughter from this aircraft. Based on the evidence, doing so could constitute further civil rights violations." Jenkins's face contorted with rage. "You work for the airport, not this passenger. I am the captain of this aircraft. And I'm responsible for ensuring airport security operations comply with federal law," the officer replied calmly. "My supervisor has instructed us not to intervene except to maintain safety." It was the final collapse of Jenkins's authority, a public repudiation that left him standing alone, abandoned even by those who would normally enforce his commands without question. In that moment of Captain's impotence, Jasmine again rose from her seat. The cabin instantly quieted. "I've been thinking about all the times I've experienced discrimination and stayed quiet," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. "The store security guards who follow me. The teachers who seem surprised when I know the answers. The people who clutch their bags tighter when I walk by." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Each time, I told myself it wasn't worth making a scene. That if I just worked harder, achieved more, proved myself beyond any doubt, eventually it would stop. Today has shown me that's not true. No amount of achievement protects you when others see your skin color as a threat." Dr. Williams watched his daughter with unmistakable pride. The transformation happening before his eyes, from victim to advocate, filled him with complicated emotions. Pride in her courage mingled with sorrow that such courage was necessary. "So I'm making a promise, to myself and anyone watching," Jasmine continued. "I will never stay silent again. Not when it happens to me, and not when I see it happening to others. The only way this stops is if we all refuse to accept it, every single time." The cabin erupted in applause once more, louder and more sustained than before. Even some of the Atlantic Airline staff, recognizing which way the wind was blowing, joined in. A small act of rebellion against the captain who had led them into this public relations disaster. Outside the aircraft, the situation had escalated further. Atlantic Airlines stock had fallen nearly 8%. Social media engagement had reached unprecedented levels, with celebrities and politicians weighing in to support Dr. Williams and Jasmine. Calls for boycotts were spreading rapidly, and competing airlines had begun subtly positioning their own diversity commitments in contrast to Atlantic's failures. Palmer, still on the speakerphone, recognized the breaking point had been reached. His primary responsibility was to the company's shareholders, and every minute this standoff continued cost millions in market value and incalculable reputational damage. "Dar. Williams," he said, voice strained but resolute, "you've made your point powerfully. We concede to all your demands. Atlantic Airlines will issue a public apology acknowledging the discriminatory treatment of your daughter. Captain Jenkins and Flight Attendant Taylor will be terminated, effective immediately. We will implement comprehensive anti-bias training across our entire workforce, with progress verified by an independent third party. Additionally, we're establishing a scholarship fund in Jasmine's name for young minorities interested in aviation and aerospace." The cabin fell silent, absorbing the unprecedented capitulation. "Furthermore," Palmer continued, "we request that you consider serving as a consultant to help us reform our policies. Your perspective as both a NASA engineer and a black parent would be invaluable in ensuring we address these issues systematically. Dr. Williams considered the offer carefully. I'll need all of this in writing before the plane takes off. And I expect Atlantic Airlines to make the terminations and policy changes public within 24 hours. Agreed, Palmer replied immediately. With that single word, the standoff effectively ended. Captain Jenkins was instructed to return to the terminal, where a replacement crew would take command of the aircraft. Karen Porter was quietly escorted off the plane by airport security, her information taken for potential further action. As a new flight crew boarded, they approached Jasmine and Dr. Williams with conspicuous respect. "We're honored to have you aboard, Dr. Williams, Ms. Williams. Is there anything we can do to make your journey more comfortable?" The contrast with their earlier treatment couldn't have been more stark. A visible reminder of how quickly power dynamics could shift when discrimination was confronted directly instead of endured silently. As the aircraft finally prepared for departure, nearly 5 hours behind schedule, Jasmine leaned toward her father. "Do you think anything will really change?" she asked quietly. Dr. Williams considered the question seriously. "Systems don't change easily," he acknowledged. "But today, you helped move the needle. Sometimes that's all we can do. Create enough pressure that the next person faces a little less resistance." Jasmine nodded, turning to look out the window as the plane finally began to taxi. The science competition still awaited her in Houston, but she was already learning lessons far beyond what any academic contest could teach. Atlantic Airlines' public apology went live at 7 a.m. the following morning. It appeared simultaneously on their website, social media accounts, and as full-page advertisements in major newspapers across the country. The statement was unequivocal: Atlantic Airlines apologizes unreservedly to Jasmine Williams for the discriminatory treatment she experienced on Flight AA-237. We acknowledge that Ms. Williams was removed from her rightfully purchased seat solely because another passenger was uncomfortable sitting next to a young black woman. This incident reflects a failure of our culture, our training, and our leadership. We are taking immediate corrective action, including terminating the employment of Captain Thomas Jenkins and flight attendant Brenda Taylor. Additionally, we are implementing comprehensive anti-bias training across our entire organization and revising our policies to ensure such discrimination never occurs again. The apology, far more direct than the carefully worded non-apologies typical of corporate crisis management, sent shockwaves through the business community. Atlantic Airlines had chosen to explicitly acknowledge racial discrimination rather than hide behind euphemisms about customer service failures or misunderstandings. By noon, the story had evolved further. Internet sleuths had identified Karen Porter as a vice president at a prominent financial institution. Her employer, facing mounting pressure as her role in the incident became widely known, issued a statement temporarily reassigning her pending an internal investigation into whether her actions violated the company's code of conduct. For Jasmine, arriving in Houston with her father by her side, the aftermath brought a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Messages of support from friends and strangers alike, interview requests from major news outlets, and social media tags as her story continued to spread. "You should turn that off for a while," Dr. Williams suggested gently as they checked into their hotel. "You need to focus on the competition." Jasmine nodded, though they both knew the competition now felt almost secondary to what had happened. Still, she had worked too hard on her research to let it go to waste. The competition organizers had arranged for a private meeting with Jasmine upon her arrival. The director, Dr. Sarah Abernathy, greeted her warmly. "Jasmine, we want you to know that everyone here stands with you," she said. "What happened on that flight was inexcusable, and we're proud of how you handled it. If you need any accommodations, extra time to prepare, schedule adjustments, just let us know." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, "but I'd like to proceed as planned. I've been preparing for months, and I'm ready." Dr. Abernathy nodded, respect evident in her expression. Your presentation slot is tomorrow at 2 p.m. The judges have been instructed to evaluate solely on scientific merit, but honestly, your poise under pressure has already impressed everyone here. Back at Atlantic Airlines headquarters, the fallout continued. The company's legal team worked frantically to prepare for potential lawsuits, while human resources processed the termination paperwork for Jenkins and Taylor. The public response to the airline's apology had been mixed. Some praised the directness, while others questioned whether it would lead to meaningful change. CEO Palmer had convened an emergency meeting with his executive leadership team, most of whom appeared shell-shocked by the speed and magnitude of the crisis. The Department of Transportation has opened an investigation into our compliance with non-discrimination regulations, the legal counsel reported grimly. They're requesting all complaints related to racial discrimination over the past 5 years. Palmer winced. The internal data he'd seen suggested a pattern that could prove damaging if fully exposed. What about the whistleblower? He asked. Do we know who leaked those emails? The head of security shook his head. Not yet, but the leak continues. An investigative journalism team just published internal memos showing customer service representatives were trained to accommodate passengers who expressed discomfort with seatmates of different races or religions. Outside the corporate bubble, the public reaction continued to intensify. Hashtag Boycott Atlantic Airlines remained trending, alongside hashtag Jasmine Williams and hashtag NASADAD. Competing airlines seized the opportunity, launching new ad campaigns emphasizing their commitment to diversity and inclusion, thinly veiled attempts to capitalize on Atlantic's misfortune. At NASA headquarters, the Public Affairs Office had released a second statement, more forceful than the first. NASA stands unequivocally with Dr. Michael Williams and his daughter Jasmine. The treatment they experienced represents the kind of discrimination that has no place in our society. We are proud that Dr. Williams demonstrated the moral courage we expect from those entrusted with advancing America's space program. NASA remains committed to fostering diversity in STEM fields and condemns any actions that create barriers for talented young people like Jasmine Williams. The statement was accompanied by an announcement that NASA would sponsor a new scholarship program for underrepresented minorities interested in aerospace careers, named in Jasmine's honor. That evening, as Jasmine reviewed her presentation in the hotel room, Dr. Williams received a call from a civil rights attorney who had been watching the situation unfold. Dr. Williams, my name is Angela Thompson. I represent several former Atlantic Airlines passengers who experienced similar discrimination. With your permission, we'd like to include your daughter's experience in a class action lawsuit against the airline. Dr. Williams considered the offer carefully. I'll need to discuss this with Jasmine. She's the one who experienced the discrimination firsthand, and I want this to be her decision. When he broached the subject with Jasmine, she surprised him with her response. I don't want money from a lawsuit, Dad, she said thoughtfully. What I want is for Atlantic Airlines to actually change. Maybe we can use this situation to push for real reforms instead of just punishing them. Dr. Williams studied his daughter with newfound admiration. At 16, she was already thinking strategically about systemic change rather than personal gain. What did you have in mind? He asked. What if, instead of a lawsuit, we asked them to fund programs that help black students pursue careers in aviation? And implement transparent reporting on discrimination complaints? And maybe create a passenger bill of rights specifically addressing racial bias? Dr. Williams nodded slowly. That's actually brilliant, Jasmine. Litigation could drag on for years and might just end with a confidential settlement. Your approach could create lasting institutional change. As they refined their proposal late into the night, news continued to break about Atlantic Airlines. An anonymous employee had leaked the company's internal complaint database, revealing dozens of similar incidents that had been quietly resolved with vouchers and non-disclosure agreements. Investigative journalists were having a field day connecting the dots between company policies and discriminatory outcomes. By morning, Atlantic Airlines stock had fallen a total of 15% since the incident began. The board of directors was reportedly meeting to discuss Palmer's future as CEO, and shareholders were publicly questioning the company's risk management practices. For Jasmine, however, the focus had shifted back to science. As she donned her competition blazer and gathered her presentation materials, she felt a new sense of purpose. The research she would present today on atmospheric conditions and flight safety had taken on additional meaning, a reminder that her contributions to aviation went far beyond being the subject of a viral discrimination incident. "Ready?" Dr. Williams asked as they prepared to leave for the competition venue. Jasmine nodded, squaring her shoulders. "More than ready." The Houston Convention Center buzzed with activity as young scientists from across the country showcased their research. Display boards lined the exhibition hall, each representing months of investigation, experimentation, and analysis. Under normal circumstances, Jasmine would have blended in with the other competitors, just another talented teenager in formal attire, nervously rehearsing presentation points. Today was different. Heads turned as she entered, whispers following in her wake. Some competitors approached directly, offering words of support or sharing their own experiences with discrimination. Others kept their distance, perhaps unsure how to engage with someone at the center of a national controversy. Jasmine Williams. A competition coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. "The judges wanted me to check if you still feel comfortable proceeding with your presentation today. Given the circumstances, they would understand if you preferred to reschedule." "I'm presenting as planned," Jasmine replied firmly. "I didn't come all this way to back out now." The coordinator nodded, clearly impressed. "You're in room 14B at 2 p.m. The media requests have been overwhelming. We've denied press access to the presentation rooms, but just be aware there may be reporters waiting afterward." Jasmine thanked her, then made her way to the preparation area. As she reviewed her notes one final time, her phone buzzed with a notification. Atlantic Airlines had just released another statement, announcing the resignation of CEO Jackson Palmer, to facilitate new leadership during this period of organizational transformation. The board had appointed Lisa Martinez, previously Chief Operations Officer, as interim CEO, making her the first woman of color to lead a major U.S. airline. "Dad, look," Jasmine showed the news to her father. Dr. Williams read the announcement with raised eyebrows. "That's a significant development." "Palmer must have lost the board's confidence completely. Do you think it will make a difference?" Jasmine asked. "Possibly. Martinez has a reputation for operational excellence, but the real question is whether she has the vision and authority to change the company culture." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "But that's not your focus right now. You've got science to present." Jasmine nodded, returning to her preparation. Her research on atmospheric disturbances and their effects on flight patterns had taken on an ironic dimension given recent events, but the science remained sound. She had identified correlations between specific weather patterns and turbulence that could potentially improve flight safety protocols, work that had earned her this coveted spot among the nation's top young scientists. At precisely 2 p.m., Jasmine entered room 14B. 5 judges sat at a table facing the presentation area, their expressions professionally neutral. A small audience of fellow competitors, mentors, and competition officials filled the remaining seats. "Good afternoon," Jasmine began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "My name is Jasmine Williams, and my research examines the relationship between upper atmospheric wind shear and commercial flight turbulence patterns." As she progressed through her presentation, displaying data visualizations and explaining her methodology, Jasmine felt a familiar calm descend. Here, in the realm of science, she was judged solely on the merit of her ideas and the rigor of her research. The equations didn't care about her race. The data didn't discriminate. One judge, a meteorologist from the National Weather Service, leaned forward with interest as Jasmine explained how her algorithm could potentially predict areas of severe turbulence with greater accuracy than current models. "Ms. Williams," he said during the question period, "have you considered how your model might be integrated with existing flight planning systems? Yes, sir, Jasmine replied confidently. The beauty of this algorithm is its compatibility with standard aviation weather forecasting platforms. With minimal adaptation, it could supplement existing systems to provide pilots with more granular turbulence predictions, potentially reducing fuel consumption through more efficient routing and enhancing passenger safety. The judges exchanged impressed glances. Despite everything she had endured in the past 24 hours, Jasmine's scientific presentation was flawless. Poised, articulate, and demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of both the theoretical and practical implications of her research. As she concluded her presentation, the room erupted in applause more enthusiastic than customary for these technical sessions. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something remarkable, a young woman who, despite being thrust into a national controversy about racial discrimination, had maintained her focus on scientific excellence. Outside the convention center, the world continued to react to the Atlantic Airline situation. The company's stock had stabilized following Martinez's appointment, though it remained significantly below its pre-incident value. Social media analysis showed public sentiment beginning to shift from outrage toward discussions of systemic change across the airline industry. Transportation Secretary David Chen had announced a comprehensive review of customer service policies across all major airlines, specifically examining potential patterns of discriminatory treatment. Civil rights organizations were seizing the moment to push for stronger enforcement of existing non-discrimination regulations in public accommodations. For Karen Porter, the passenger whose complaint had triggered the incident, the consequences continued to mount. Her employer had placed her on administrative leave pending investigation, and her name and image were being shared widely online. Some condemned the public shaming as excessive, while others argued it represented appropriate accountability for actions with significant public impact. Captain Jenkins had released a statement through his attorney, claiming he had followed established protocols and denying any discriminatory intent. The statement was immediately contradicted by Atlantic Airlines' own admission of discrimination and by multiple witness accounts. His pilots' union had declined to contest his termination, issuing a statement that safety and respect for all passengers are non-negotiable responsibilities of any commercial pilot. Back at the competition, Jasmine exited her presentation room to find her father waiting with a proud smile. "You were amazing," he said, embracing her. "How did it feel?" "Good," Jasmine replied, the tension finally releasing from her shoulders. "Really good. For those 15 minutes, I was just a scientist presenting my work, not a symbol or a victim or a hashtag." As they walked toward the exhibition hall, her phone buzzed with another notification. The initial judging results had been posted. Jasmine had advanced to the finals, scheduled for the following morning. "You did it!" Dr. Williams exclaimed. "Top 10 nationwide." Jasmine beamed, the scientific validation momentarily overshadowing everything else. "I can't believe it. With everything that happened, I wasn't sure I'd be able to focus enough to make it through." "I never doubted you for a second," her father replied. "You've always been able to perform under pressure. It's one of your superpowers." As word spread that Jasmine had advanced to the finals, competition organizers approached with an unusual request. "The media situation has become complicated," explained the competition director, Dr. Abernathy. "We have news crews outside demanding interviews with Jasmine about both the airline incident and her research. We typically don't allow media access until after the competition concludes, but these are extraordinary circumstances." Dr. Williams looked to Jasmine. "It's your call. You're not obligated to speak to anyone right now." Jasmine considered the options. Part of her wanted to focus exclusively on the competition, to be recognized for her scientific achievements rather than her experience with discrimination. Another part recognized the platform she now had, a chance to speak directly to millions about both racism and the importance of diversity in science. "I'll do one brief statement," she decided. "But I want to talk about my research too, not just what happened on the plane." Dr. Abernathy nodded approvingly. "We'll set up a controlled environment and limit questions. And Jasmine? The judges wanted me to tell you informally that they were incredibly impressed by your presentation, especially given the circumstances. Outside in a small courtyard, competition officials had arranged a brief press conference. A forest of microphones greeted Jasmine as she stepped up to the podium, cameras tracking her every movement. "Thank you for coming," she began, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yesterday, I experienced discrimination that unfortunately is all too common for people of color in America. Today, I presented research that could potentially make air travel safer for everyone. Both of these experiences are part of my reality as a young black woman in science." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "What happened on that Atlantic Airlines flight was wrong, and I'm grateful for the public support that helped hold them accountable. But I didn't come to Houston to become the face of airline discrimination. I came to share my research on atmospheric conditions and flight safety, research that earned me a spot in tomorrow's finals." The reporters listened attentively, many scribbling notes or recording her words. "I hope my experience helps create meaningful change in how airlines treat passengers of color. But I also hope it inspires other young black students to pursue science despite the barriers they may face. The algorithm I've developed doesn't care about my race, gender, or age, only whether it correctly predicts turbulence patterns. That's the beauty of science, and it's open to everyone with the curiosity and persistence to explore it." As she fielded a few questions, deftly balancing responses about both the discrimination incident and her scientific work, Jasmine demonstrated a poise and articulation that belied her 16 years. The resulting news coverage would portray her not just as a victim of discrimination, but as a brilliant young scientist with a promising future. That evening, as Jasmine prepared for the finals, Atlantic Airlines' new CEO Lisa Martinez held her first press conference. Standing before the company logo, Martinez outlined a comprehensive plan for organizational change. "The incident involving Jasmine Williams exposed unacceptable failures in our company culture," Martinez acknowledged directly. "Today, we're announcing mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, revisions to our complaint protocols to prevent discrimination, transparent reporting of diversity metrics, and the establishment of a passenger bill of rights specifically addressing equal treatment regardless of race, religion, gender, or other protected characteristics." Most significantly, Martinez announced the formation of an external advisory council on diversity and inclusion, and extended a public invitation to Dr. Williams to serve as its inaugural chair. Watching the press conference from their hotel room, Jasmine turned to her father. "They're actually doing it. They're making real changes." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "The pressure worked. Public accountability is a powerful force for change, when properly applied." "Do you think you'll accept?" Jasmine asked. "The advisory position?" "I'm considering it," he replied. "There's value in having a seat at the table when policies are being shaped. But my priority right now is supporting you through this competition and whatever comes next." Jasmine nodded, returning to her preparation for the finals. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but she faced them with a new confidence. The knowledge that her voice carried weight, that standing up for justice could create tangible change, and that her scientific contributions were being recognized on their merits. As she refined her final presentation late into the night, social media continued to buzz with discussions of her dual roles as discrimination victim and scientific prodigy. The hashtag Jasmine Williams effect was trending, describing situations where speaking truth to power led to institutional change. For Jasmine herself, however, the most meaningful development was much more personal, the discovery of her own resilience and voice. Whatever the outcome of tomorrow's competition, she had already learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, the power of refusing to accept injustice, even when confronting it came at personal cost. The final round of the National Youth Science Competition drew unprecedented attention. Normally attended primarily by proud parents and science educators, today's event had attracted national media, corporate sponsors, and even a few celebrities eager to witness Jasmine Williams's final presentation. Competition officials had been forced to move the event to the convention center's main auditorium to accommodate the overflow crowd. Security was visibly enhanced, with staff checking credentials at every entrance. Outside, a small group of protesters carried signs supporting Atlantic Airlines and Captain Jenkins, but they were vastly outnumbered by Jasmine's supporters. Backstage, Jasmine made final adjustments to her presentation slides. Despite the circus atmosphere, she remained focused on the science. The culmination of months of research, data analysis, and rigorous testing of her atmospheric turbulence prediction model. "You ready?" Dr. Williams asked, straightening his tie. He'd worn his NASA jacket again, a silent reminder of the credentials that had helped turn the tide during the discrimination incident. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jasmine replied. She'd chosen to wear a professional black suit with a subtle cosmic pattern on her blouse. A nod to her aerospace aspirations without being flashy. As the finalists were introduced one by one, the audience applauded politely for each young scientist. When Jasmine's name was called, however, the response was thunderous, a standing ovation before she'd even presented her research. She approached the podium with measured steps, waiting for the applause to subside. "Thank you," she began, "but I haven't earned that yet. I'd appreciate being judged solely on the scientific merit of my work today." The statement set the tone for what followed, a presentation of remarkable technical sophistication delivered with the confidence of someone twice her age. Jasmine walked the judges and audience through her algorithm's development, the atmospheric data patterns she'd identified, and the potential real-world applications for improving flight safety. When she concluded, the applause was just as enthusiastic, but different in quality, recognition of intellectual achievement rather than symbolic support. The judges' questions were probing and technical, and Jasmine answered each with precision and depth of understanding. After all 10 finalists had presented, the judges retired to deliberate. The tension in the auditorium was palpable as everyone awaited their decision. Jasmine sat quietly between presentations, occasionally checking her phone for updates on the Atlantic Airlines situation. The news continued to evolve rapidly. A group of former Atlantic employees had come forward with documentation of a systematic pattern of accommodating racist passenger complaints. The Department of Transportation's investigation had expanded to include all major U.S. airlines. Karen Porter had been terminated from her executive position after her company concluded her actions violated their code of conduct. Most significantly, Atlantic Airlines had published their new passenger Bill of Rights and anti-discrimination policies, explicitly prohibiting any accommodation of biased customer preferences regarding seating. The company had also announced a partnership with civil rights organizations to develop more comprehensive anti-bias training. After nearly an hour of deliberation, the judges returned to announce their decision. The audience fell silent as the head judge approached the microphone. This year's competition featured exceptional research across multiple scientific disciplines, she began. The judges were particularly impressed with the real-world applicability of many projects. She continued through various honorable mentions and category awards. When she reached the overall competition rankings, tension mounted. In second place, with research that demonstrates both scientific rigor and significant practical application potential, the silver medal goes to Jasmine Williams for her atmospheric turbulence prediction algorithm. The audience erupted in applause as Jasmine made her way to the stage. While not the top prize, second place in this prestigious national competition represented extraordinary achievement, especially given the circumstances surrounding her participation. As she accepted the medal and certificate, Jasmine felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in her scientific accomplishment. Satisfaction at being judged on merit rather than used as a symbol. A twinge of disappointment at not securing first place. And underlying it all, a new awareness of her capacity to influence systems much larger than herself. The awards ceremony concluded with a reception where sponsors, judges, and competitors mingled. Jasmine found herself at the center of attention, fielding questions about both her research and her experience with Atlantic Airlines. A representative from NASA's Educational Outreach Program approached, introducing herself as Dr. Monica Chen. "Jasmine, your research is incredibly impressive. We'd like to discuss potential internship opportunities with you when you're ready." Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. Atlantic Airlines had just announced the creation of the Jasmine Williams Scholarship for minority students pursuing careers in aviation and aerospace, a $500,000 annual commitment. Dr. Williams, reading the announcement over her shoulder, raised an eyebrow. "They're naming it after you without asking permission?" "Actually," Jasmine replied with a small smile, "they did ask. I approved it last night via email. It was part of our conditions for not pursuing litigation." Her father looked surprised, then impressed. "You've been busy." "I learned from the best," she replied, bumping his shoulder lightly with hers. As the reception continued, another notification appeared, this one a personal email from Lisa Martinez, Atlantic Airlines' new CEO, "Ms. Williams, I wanted to inform you personally that Captain Jenkins and Flight Attendant Taylor have been officially terminated following our internal investigation. Additionally, we've completed a review of similar incidents over the past 3 years and will be reaching out to affected passengers with both apologies and compensation. The External Advisory Council on Diversity and Inclusion will hold its first meeting next month, and we would be honored if your father would consider our invitation to chair it. Most importantly, I want to thank you for your courage in standing up against discrimination. Your actions have catalyzed long overdue changes not just at Atlantic Airlines, but across our industry." Jasmine shared the email with her father, who nodded thoughtfully. "They're doing the right things. The question is whether they'll maintain this commitment when public attention moves on. That's why you should take the advisory position," Jasmine urged. "To keep the pressure on from the inside." 2 weeks later, Jasmine and Dr. Williams found themselves at the airport again, this time preparing to return home. Their experience couldn't have been more different from Jasmine's original journey. Atlantic Airlines staff treated them with conspicuous respect. Fellow passengers occasionally recognized them, offering words of support or simply a thumbs up. As they settled into their first-class seats, upgraded by the airline without request, Jasmine gazed out the window at the tarmac below. "What are you thinking about?" her father asked. "Everything that's changed in 2 weeks," she replied. "For Atlantic Airlines, for the industry, for me." Dr. Williams nodded. "You found your voice. That's no small thing." "I'm starting an advocacy group at school," Jasmine said, turning from the window. "For minority students in STEM. We'll provide mentorship, resources, and support for dealing with discrimination." Turning your experience into something positive, her father observed with approval. The flight attendant approached, offering pre-departure beverages with a genuine smile. No one questioned Jasmine's presence in first class. No one made her feel unwelcome or less deserving of her seat. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her here, not just the physical distance traveled, but the profound transformation she'd undergone. From a student scientist afraid to make waves to an advocate unafraid to challenge injustice. From a victim of discrimination to a catalyst for institutional change. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, lifting smoothly into the sky. Jasmine watched the ground fall away below, the perspective shifting as they climbed higher. Sometimes, she realized, that's what justice required, a radical shift in perspective, the courage to see things from a higher vantage point, and the determination to demand better. 6 months later, Jasmine stood at a podium in her high school auditorium, addressing the inaugural meeting of the Minority Scientists Association she had founded. The group had already attracted 30 members from across the district, with support from teachers, administrators, and even corporate sponsors. "My experience taught me something essential," she told the assembled students. "That silence in the face of discrimination doesn't protect you. It only ensures the same treatment will continue for others who come after you." She gestured to the NASA representatives seated in the front row, there to announce a new partnership with her organization. Standing up against injustice isn't just about fighting wrongs done to you personally. It's about changing systems so they work better for everyone. My research focuses on making flights safer during turbulence. But that day on Atlantic Airlines taught me that the most dangerous turbulence isn't atmospheric, it's the disruption that occurs when we challenge entrenched prejudice. Dr. Williams watched from the side of the stage, his NASA jacket now adorned with a new pin, identifying him as chair of Atlantic Airlines Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. The company had experienced its own transformation, becoming an unlikely leader in anti-discrimination policies across the airline industry. So when you face discrimination, and sadly, many of you will, remember that your response can create ripples far beyond your individual experience, Jasmine continued. Speaking up isn't just for you. It's for everyone who will walk the path after you, finding it a little more accessible because you refuse to accept injustice. The applause that followed wasn't just for her words, but for the example she had set. A young black woman who had transformed discrimination into opportunity, not just for herself but for countless others who would benefit from the changes she had helped create. What would you have done if you witnessed what happened to Jasmine on that flight? Would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Have you ever experienced discrimination and found the courage to stand against it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you or made you think differently about speaking up against injustice, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message of courage and transformation, share this video with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept the unacceptable. Your voice matters more than you know. Jasmine's experience teaches us that confronting discrimination directly can create meaningful change beyond individual justice. By refusing to accept mistreatment, she and her father transformed a painful incident into systemic reform. Their courage demonstrates how documentation, public accountability, and unwavering dignity can dismantle institutional racism. The story reveals how privilege operates in subtle and overt ways, from microaggressions to outright removal. But also shows how leveraging different forms of power, Dr. Williams' NASA credentials, can challenge unjust systems. It illustrates that silence from bystanders enables discrimination to continue unchecked. Most importantly, this narrative highlights that true transformation requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. Jasmine's advocacy didn't end with her personal vindication but extended to creating pathways for others facing similar barriers. Her ability to balance righteous anger with strategic action demonstrates that effective changemakers can channel pain into progress. The ripple effects of standing up, from corporate policy reforms to community organizing, remind us that speaking truth to power can catalyze change far beyond what we initially imagined possible. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and found yourself unsure whether to speak up? Share your experience in the comments below. If you've ever stood against injustice like Jasmine and her father, we'd love to hear your story. Was there a moment when you had to choose between comfortable silence and difficult truth? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach others who need this message of courage and transformation. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about overcoming adversity and standing up for what's right. And if you know someone struggling to find their voice against discrimination, share this video as a reminder that speaking up matters. Thank you for listening with an open heart. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to accept the unacceptable. Your voice matters more than you know.